So I've just taken my standards check, and I just thought it would be helpful potentially for any ADIs or PDIs coming up to standards checks or part 3 to hit my story, my experience of how it went. If this helps, then great. If it doesn't, don't worry. So my first part is why did I do a standards check? Now, I actually requested to do a standards check rather than got called up for it. So my reasoning behind requesting is I hadn't done one for about 5, maybe even 6 years, and I couldn't see myself getting called up based on my triggers, as they were all above the limits. So I wanted to go and experience the standards check again. Basically, I train PDIs to do their part 3, and I help ADIs with standards checks, and I think I'd forgotten what it was like, so I kind of wanted to have that experience. I wanted to feel those emotions that you get, so I can have more empathy and pass on my experience as well when helping you guys. So yeah, that's why I sort of went off and thought, right, let's go get out my comfort zone and test myself. So yeah, went into the standards check. The first part of this, I was feeling relatively confident. I thought I'd be okay. And then I remember getting the email saying, yeah, you can go book your test, and it was a lot sooner than I was expecting. So I thought I'd have a while to sort of kind of get ready for this. And so it was now suddenly only like 4 weeks away. And I remember getting a gut sort of kind of butterflies feeling in my stomach, and that really surprised me because genuinely I felt okay about doing the test. I wouldn't have asked to do it otherwise. And yeah, no, suddenly it was real, and I was getting this sort of kind of butterflies. So that passed, and I relaxed a little bit, and I started going into planning mode of like, what am I going to do, and controlling those sort of kind of things that I can control. But it made me aware that maybe as I got closer to the day, I might be getting those feelings again. So they surprised me a little bit, but again, that's part of why I wanted to do this. Is I wanted to experience those feelings and emotions so that I could better help my PDIs and ADIs. So my first job then was to start thinking, right, I need a pupil. Who am I going to pick? Now, I don't have as many pupils as some instructors due to running the business and instructor training, so I had a smaller pool of pupils to choose from. My main goal was to pick someone who I have a good rapport with. Asked me a lot of questions. I ask him questions, he talks. Having just done the standards check, it probably talks a bit too much, but it was all about that rapport basically, and obviously maybe the right level for what the training I wanted. So I didn't want someone too new, I didn't want someone too ready, so he was sort of in that middle ground where he still had stuff to work on, and the idea would be that he wasn't overwhelming with faults and stuff. Didn't quite pan out that way, but we'll get to that. Because it never does pan out the way you want it to. Also had a couple of backup pupils just in case that anything went wrong, and I sort of managed the situation with that pupil, checking he was still available. He seemed fully keen, and I couldn't imagine him wanting to let me down. It was interesting, his response as well when I asked him. His first response was, will I have to drive properly, as if like, is he being tested? And that's something that I try and pass on as well to PDIs, that the pupils will feel like they're being tested. They will feel that pressure, and that then tends to come out in their driving, as it potentially can make their driving a little bit more erratic. Faults can come in, and they might not be the same driver they were the week before. So yeah, that's something to bear in mind, and again, it's something I pass on to my instructors, but it was nice to experience it and sort of go, actually, yeah, that is a thing, and they do that. So yeah, he was suddenly starting to feel nervous about it the day as well, which was interesting. so as we went sort of through this process and it was getting closer, I could see myself being more conscious of my lessons, almost marking myself in my own head as I was going through. Watched a couple of lessons back on video to make sure I was doing what I thought should be doing. I didn't get any extra training, but then I think partly because I do the training, so I, in a way, and maybe I should have done, but I felt that I could sort of almost train myself in a way. I did go to the instructor conference this weekend, so there was a few sort of kind of snippets from there that I took on, and I have in the past sent videos of my lessons off to people like Lou Walsh, to review and see how and get their opinion. So I have had that training, and actually it was 5-6 years ago since I did a standards check, so the amount of training I've done since then is quite high. So I felt like I've done my development over the 5 years, not suddenly I've got a standards check, quick do some training. So that's something I would add in there, is that don't wait for your standards check to do some training, be continuously improving, and then when it comes to the standards check, it's not as daunting. So moving on then, I got my engagement call. This was, I didn't really know hugely what to expect, and again, another reason why I wanted to do this, so that I do know what to expect. It was a great chat, to be honest. Nothing to worry about. We had a chat about the test report form. Now, that was probably slightly different to maybe someone who had been called up for a standards check, so there might be more, oh right, well these are the errors, this is maybe an area you want to work on. My form didn't obviously have too many, like the pass rates and things like that were fine. However, there were a couple of clumps of where faults were coming from, so that sort of gave me food for thought and things to look at. I think there was observations and steering. So observations I would expect to be high, because it's just one of those things that crops up, but again, worth looking at on my lessons. And then steering, which actually interestingly came up on the standards check, so that was a nice big circle there, which was fun. So yeah, the standards check, it was a very informal chat. It was just like, how are you doing, what could you do better, that sort of kind of thing. How do you feel like your training's going, have you done any extra training, that sort of questions. But yeah, there's nothing to be sort of wary of there. It's not about the standards check, that engagement call. It is all about just you improving as a driving instructor and how can they help, basically. So yeah, please don't be afraid of that call. It isn't a test, it's there. And something quite good, I think, that the DVSA have put in, where they can try and support instructors that maybe need it, which is great. So moving on then, we're getting closer to my standards check, and I have my last lesson with the pupil. So now it's time to start thinking what topic, and before this I have not even considered what topic I'm going to be doing, because as I tell everyone who I train, it's all about what the pupil needs. Okay, so you can't go, I'm going to do roundabouts 6 weeks in advance, because what if the pupil doesn't need to do roundabouts? Or what if the pupil is struggling with other stuff and you try and do roundabouts, and then that just becomes glaringly obvious on the roundabout. So it's not about the topic you want to teach, it's about the topic that people needs in the moment. So moving on from our final lesson, we had a conversation about, towards the end actually, we started sort of kind of noticing that he wasn't picking up signposts, and sometimes other hazards, and also wasn't linking it into checking his mirrors when he did see hazards. So there was sort of kind of an area of there of like awareness and planning needed, and mirror checking, so just sort of hazard checking, I suppose. So I had planned an area to practice where I was going to go through to the town centre and talk about the hazards and the signposts, and work on checking your mirrors as we went through that process. So that was the plan, going into it, and that didn't happen, because as on the way to the test, we had a couple of issues on the roundabouts, two pretty sort of glaringly serious fault style issues on the roundabouts. Now, I then had a kind of decision to make at that point, was there's a clear need here to sort of go and have a look at the roundabouts. But I could have done the other lesson and avoided roundabouts. And so it didn't come across any roundabouts on the route that I was planning. But I just felt that was unnatural, because if it was a normal lesson, which it's supposed to be, and I'd picked up the pupil on the way to the practice area, there would have been these glaringly obvious issues on roundabouts, I probably would have moved on and done roundabouts. So it felt quite natural to sort of do that. So I had a chat with the pupil. He was like in agreement and said, yes, I would like to have a look at that issue and not leave it hanging over my head. And so, yeah, we changed the topic of my standards check about 15 minutes before I started my standards check. This is kind of what I talked to you guys about, not over planning. So if I'd really planned this route and all these questions, something like that happens, it would have thrown me. But very much I just planned an idea of a lesson, and then I would have gone off it and I would have adapted as it went, basically. So that's kind of what I did with roundabouts. I just went, let's go do some roundabouts, see what it goes, and see and adapt as necessary. So before I get into how the test went, I was quite surprised, well, maybe not as surprised, because obviously I was nervous on that when I first got that letter, how nervous I suddenly was the day before. I was questioning everything I already know, and like, do I do that well? Have I done that? Should I be doing that? Have I asked that question? So lots of sort of kind of doubt going in my head. So yeah, it really surprised me, because I'm not an anxious person in normal life. So again, kind of why I did this experience, because I want to feel those feelings, and I want to sort of go, okay, yeah, I get it. This is why you're ringing me up or texting me at midnight going, Phil, do I have to do this on my standards check because you're waking up in cold sweats in the middle of the night? So I get it. And this is again why I did this experience. So then moving on to the day of the test, yeah, I was feeling it, and the nerves, and on my way to pick up my pupil, I was using the Diane Hall's ABC technique of handling nerves and acknowledging my feelings, and talking myself through why it'll be fine, and then doing some breathing techniques to calm myself down. I wouldn't say I was out of control, but it was bubbling, and I felt I needed to chill. That helped. Then I put Mr. Brightside on really loud in the car on the way to the pupils, and had a sort of got it out my system, and just had a little sing along, and uplifted it, and just got it all out of my head and chilled. And actually that really helped. I suddenly was just like not thinking, not stressing. And then the next thing that happened was the people got in the car, and actually weirdly I then switched, and I just went, I'm a driving instructor, and just did a driving lesson. From that point of the people getting in the car, we started the lesson, we had the conversation of what we were going to go and have a look at. We started looking at it on the way to the test. The roundabout situation happened, and I did what I normally would do, which is completely change and have a look at this roundabout issue that's now come up. So yeah, that really helped, making it just like, this is what I do day in, day out. And yeah, I think actually from that point, when I don't think I hit those nerves again, even when I got to the test center and chatted to the examiner, it didn't kick in. It was just like, yeah, I'm just doing my job. And I almost like the fact that I changed the lesson, because it made me go, this is just a normal lesson. It's what I'm doing. It's what I do every day. And so it really did calm me down a little bit. I didn't feel like I was nervous from that point onwards, which was nice. So we went off into the test, and although I wasn't nervous, I definitely was in my head going, am I doing this right, like as I go along? And in a way, you haven't got brain space to do that because you're busy trying to do the session. Should I be dealing with that? Should I be dealing with that? So there was elements of that. I'm on a test and this feels different. So yeah, it's something to be aware of, to try and just really just focus on like the pupil and what you're doing on the session. Not easy to do all the time. So what happened on the test? So we went off to do roundabouts. First situation, pupil was coming up to the traffic lights and signaled too early because there was a junction on the right, so we had a chat about that. It was great in a way because it kind of gave me something to talk about before we got to the traffic lights. And then there was another situation where there was a junction and another junction, so we had it gave me the chance to sort of prompt and look at that issue. And that cropped up a few times as we went through the lesson, and I just sort of kind of kept it in our consciousness. So that was good. Came up to the first roundabout and that went okay. That was actually fine. And then the second roundabout, actually the pupil nearly pulled out in front of a car. I went for the brake pedal, and the pupil spotted it just in time and then stopped. Now it was interesting where we were, because then we had maybe 2 or 3 roundabouts before I could find somewhere to pull over. But I was talking to him on the way back, on the way there, about it. So what we were dealing with the conversation about why, but it was a deeper conversation that I needed to have, and dig into the reasons why he hadn't seen that car early enough. And I felt like we needed to be at the side of the road for that. So I managed the situation as we went along, helped him a little bit more on the next couple of roundabouts, which were slightly easier roundabouts. And then interestingly went into a housing estate just to pull over. He then cut the corner, turning right into it. And this is kind of what I mean about your pupils throwing you curveballs and not driving how they is. Suddenly the faults were like starting to rack up. So I decided not to pull over initially and said, let's just go back and have a look at that right turn, and then we'll come back and talk about the roundabouts. So we went back, had a look at the right turn, had a conversation about the disadvantages of that, and that seemed to sort of kind of fix itself. I think it was a one-off, like, oopsie. Fortunately, there was 2 right turns before we got so a right turn before we got back to the one we initially made the mistake at, so we were able to sort of have a couple of goes at that. And yeah, that sort of kind of ticked itself off. Boom, done. Then pulled over, had this deeper chat about the issues with the decision making, and it was mainly down to where the pupils was looking. He was getting overly focused on certain cars, which meant he hadn't seen that car, or he hadn't seen it early enough to analyze where it was going. So it was about getting the pupil to move his eyes around a little bit more. So yeah, we went off to practice that. And yeah, that sort of kind of, we just gradually improved that. There were still issues there. He wasn't 100% making 100% decisions all the time, so it's still something we need to have a look at. But it was getting better. The bits where I would say I could have done slightly better, because there was so much going on, there was a couple of faults that maybe I let slide, like not signaling to exit on a roundabout at one point, and a couple of steering issues, which they were very sporadic, and it was one of those things that I felt that if we were talking about it, he would have just got it right, but there was too much. I couldn't necessarily, it would have distracted from what we were practicing. But yeah, the examiner suggested that I should have sort of pulled away and dealt with that a little bit, and he's correct, really. It would have been good to do that. I think in the moment I wanted to deal with the bigger, in my head, the bigger issue, which was the decision making at the roundabouts, but I suppose potentially the steering could then affect those decision making. So yeah, he was probably correct overall in hindsight. But yeah, the conversations were pretty good. Going along that, I think from my perspective, it felt like there was a lot going on, more than I was expecting. It was a busy time as well, so I couldn't have some of those good conversations that I sometimes have with pupils. And 45 minutes goes so quickly, so don't try and do too much is probably my biggest tip from this. Just be wary that 45 minutes is so fast, and yeah, you will be getting through it pretty rapidly. So yeah, you can just hone in and focus on that one goal, that one skill, because you're not going to fix everything in 45 minutes. Yeah, so moving forward then, what next for me in this situation? And I got my result, so I did get an A, which is great. It wasn't quite as high as I wanted, but I think I know why, because I didn't deal with some of those situations and I didn't break it down enough a little bit. and there was probably too much going on to have some of those deeper conversations that I normally have with pupils. And so that, yeah, those were the little tiny things. It's one of those ones where, like, great, it was a good score, but I think just a couple more of those conversations would have pushed it up a little bit higher. And that's kind of what I want to go and work on, really, is, and this is what this is all about. It's always continuously developing. And I want to go and have a look at, am I breaking it down enough on my lessons? Am I picking on those little things when maybe I should be, instead of just dealing with the bigger stuff and sort of almost letting the little stuff fix themselves? So yeah, it's just like a development thing. Hopefully this helps anybody who is coming up to a standards check. I'm absolutely happy to have a conversation with anyone who has got a standards check or a Part 3 coming up. And yeah, happy to help wherever I can, because yeah, they're stressful.